You want to listen to a podcast?
By who?
Georgia GOP Congressman Doug Collins.
How is it?
The greatest thing I have ever heard in my whole life.
I could not believe my ears.
In this house, wherever the rules are disregarded, chaos and mob rule. It has been said today, where is bravery? I'll tell you where bravery is found and courage is found. It's found in this minority who has lived through the last year of nothing but rules being broken, people being put down, questions not being answered. And this majority say, be damned with anything else. We're going to impeach and do whatever we want to do. Why? Because we won an election. I guarantee you, one day you'll be back in the minority and it ain't going to be that fun. Hey everybody, welcome back to another week here on, not only for your week, but a week on the Doug Collins podcast. Glad to have you sitting in. Look, I gave it a few days, and we're going to get into it after the break here about the State of the Union. A lot of things going on about State of the Union response, but also the State of the Union, and just really what was interesting about Biden's, not only what was horrific campaign speech and a very dark campaign theme speech and very direct. There's a lot of themes that we're going to dive into here this morning as we discuss this, but also a little bit sort of the interesting part. Both the response and the president both had from the respective bases had the right for what they wanted to hear, the right messages. But it was interesting in the way the tone and the way it went about coming from both Senator Katie Britt and also the president himself. So we'll talk a little bit about that. Also, just hitting in a little bit last night. We're going to touch on just maybe a few minutes of the Oscar stuff that came last night. Not necessarily for the movies. I think it was interesting. Oppenheimer won Best Movie. Again, a very dark 3-hour plus movie that is interesting that it took it's part of the Oscars last night. And then, of course, Jimmy Kimmel and the shrill of the comedian at the Oscars. So we'll get into all this here on the Monday morning and Monday afternoon edition, whichever you listen to it here on the Doug Collins podcast. We'll be right back. Hey folks, when you look out and you see the country and just the disarray it is, you see the Biden administration, you see the wholesale prices have just went through the roof again. Inflation is tearing us up. If you have your finances all impinged in just a few areas, if you're just in stocks and bonds and you're not diversified, I got some news for you. You need a navigator. You need somebody to help you get to where you need to go with those finances. And I can't think of anybody better to do that than my friends at Legacy Precious Metals. You need precious metals in that portfolio. You need gold and silver. And Legacy Precious Metals, the folks there, they're the navigators. They know how to deal with tough times. They know and how to look ahead and take your personal situation and make it something that can be workable for you in the long term, because that's at the end of the day, that's the one you're most concerned about. You need to make sure that your personal finances and your retirement are secure. You need folks like Legacy Precious Metals helping you in that. They will take the time to learn you. They'll learn your finances. They'll learn where your investment goals are, and they'll help you get there. And metals and gold right now in this kind of crazy inflation, in this kind of crazy economy with the Biden's economy is just, you need that help. And Legacy Precious Metals is the one to do that. So give Legacy Precious Metals a call, 866-528-1903, 866-528-1903, or you can always visit them online at legacypminvestments.com, and you can download their free investor's guide. Legacy Precious Metals, they're the ones you need. They're the navigators to help you through these turbulent times. Hey everybody, Mike Lindell and the MyPillow employees want to thank all of my listeners, the great Doug Collins podcast listeners, for your continued support. To thank you, they're offering an overstocked clearance sale right now for the best price you ever use when you use the promo code Collins, COLLINS, and you get free shipping on the entire order. You get 50% off the MyPillow 2.0, the brand new flannel sheets that just arrived and won't last long. Get six-pack towel sets for only $29.98. And take advantage of the free shipping on large items like mattresses and mattress toppers. 100% made here in the United States and on sale for as low as $99. Everything is on sale, from the brand new kitchen towels that have the same technology as the bath towels that actually absorb, dog beds, blankets, couch pillows, and much, much more. To get the best specials ever, go to the mypillow.com, and use the promo code Collins, COLLINS, or call 800-986-3994 and use the same keyword Collins, COLLINS, and get free shipping on your entire order while supplies last. MyPillow products, thank you. Y'all go check them out. All right. We are 4 days away after the State of the Union. And it still strikes me. And I want to just go through a few things here today. And I think a lot's been said. And now that you have, I always enjoy giving hot takes. And most of you saw me on, I hope you saw me on the other night on TV, then also on the weekend, Friday, and on several networks talking about this. And I think the first and foremost question I'm asked is what was your initial response? And my initial response was, from a campaign speech perspective, this was pure red meat for the Democrats. This is what they wanted to hear. This is what the bar was set so low for Joe Biden to come into a speech and not just get into a fight with a teleprompter. And I think this is the part that was, I began to be concerned because that became the standard. As long as he didn't get in a fight with teleprompter, as long as he didn't do something, overtly dumb, like forget something or ramble or mess up, then he was going to be perceived as fit and ready. How that has become the standard of political speeches in this world, I have no idea, but it has. As long as you don't screw it up so badly that no matter what you say, how you say it, or what you say, who you say it to, is that nobody cares. And when you start this off, it is amazing to me. Now, number one, for those who watch this speech, and I've heard this several times, I've had some speaking engagements over the weekend. Was at the Trump rally on Saturday night down here in Georgia, which was, I'll just start this off. I mean, he had a line in the speech, I think, from a Republican perspective, conservative perspective, that that should show up in, ads and stuff right now from the Trump campaign. And whoever wrote this into the speech, spot on. He said that the other night, Thursday night, that Joe Biden was yelling at America, when the reality is America ought to be yelling at Joe Biden about all the things that are going on, all the immigration issues, all the economic issues, everything that's going on. That is really where this speech talks, because you really look at this. Joe Biden came in so amped up for this speech. I mean, just look at his eyes. I mean, there's a lot of bright lights in there, and his eyes were big as saucers. I mean, he had so much, coffee, whatever, caffeine, whatever, vitamin supplements. I don't know what they did, but he had him ready to go. And he was so amped. You could see it in the exaggerated expressions. And it's like, an over-caffeinated kid where everything is exaggerated. I mean, his reaction to Marjorie Taylor Greene, his shaking of hands, his staying 30 minutes after, his running through the speech, I think is indicative of a campaign that knew they had to show Joe Biden as having a pulse, having a ability to communicate and not look like he's falling off the stage, which is the interesting part. Now, I have waited long enough to record this because I wanted to see what happened. They have had polling done since the State of the Union, and the polling in the State of the Union, it hasn't changed a bit. There was no State of the Union bump in this first round of polling that is coming out, and his handling of the economy and immigration and job performance and everything that's still in the dissatisfaction rating in the 60%. So if they were looking for a political bump, a polling bump, however you want to call it, the State of the Union bump, which most presidents are looking for, so far that's not materialized, but it's not surprising. It's going to take more than one speech to get Joe Biden in anywhere to the realm of especially non-Democrat voters to say that, hey, he's back on track. He's actually understanding what's going on. He's not fumbling, mumbling through his words or falling off stage or tripping or can't go upstairs or forgetting who his cabinet secretaries are or forgetting who, people and world leaders' names are. Those are just things that are become embedded into the perception of Joe Biden. And then when you take on the issues of immigration and economics and inflation and all these, they just keep adding up and adding up and adding up. So, but I'm going to just hit a few things that really struck me about this speech that have been talked about, but maybe emphasize it a little bit more. Joe Biden had, and it's been widely reported that John Meacham actually was one of the helpers or writers of the speech. Now, Meacham has done books like, Power and Destiny. He did, he did the stuff on, but he's written biographies on presidents. He's done a lot of writing on the historical nature. Andrew and in Jackson other that he has written about. And he is very big theme orientated. If you've read a lot of his stuff recently at the end of the last few years, it's been big theme of democracy and these higher ideals and putting aside partisan differences and rising above. The only interesting thing is that besides his idealism that he tries to exude in books and speeches, he is a partisan Democrat, and he has been a part of writing most every one of the speeches here recently, including if you remember, the infamous Red speech in which Joe Biden went to Philadelphia and just basically trashed every civic norm of democracy and calling everybody on the Republican side, evildoers. But I mean, this is a guy who's wrote the biography on H.W. Bush and others, and he gives these themes. And in this speech, you saw the writing of a novelist and not as much of a political in the front and in the end. And this is where it gets interesting, because he walks into the speech and really being amped up about the speech. He is so hyped to start his speech that he doesn't even let Speaker Johnson introduce him in the traditional form of the speech. Now, you may not have realized this, but it became something of an interesting little side note on social media and everything else that, did Johnson just not introduce him, or did he blow through the introduction and go straight to the speech? Well, the answer is he just blew right through Johnson and got right to speech, which tells me he was more focused on, I've got to get this done, I've got to get this right, than he was about the surroundings and the formalities of what he had to do. Now, it started off really interesting. His motorcade access was blocked by pro-Hamas and pro-Gaza protesters, blocking the path from the White House to the Capitol. And so he was a little bit late even leaving the White House to get to the Capitol, and then was even later because of protests. This shows you the problem that the left have, and why also in this speech you saw what has become a real rift between the United States and Israel in this issue of the Gaza port or pier to get in food and supplies to Gaza during this time. Now, the reason I break this out for you, and I try to give you more than just that. Yes, he didn't talk about immigration that much. He'd only mentioned fentanyl in one line, and I'll talk about this. But to me, it's how they mashed this sandwich together. He starts off, and by the way, I have the media copy. This is straight from the White House on the copy of this speech. And if you can see it here, and you can flip through, it is written basically in one word lines. One sentence, very few words, one sentence at a time with exclamation points. 89. Somebody actually counted the exclamation points in the speech, and it was like 80 something speeches. But 80 something times there's an exclamation point. But when you look at this speech, it was written for someone that they didn't want to get off track. And he starts off the speech by invoking Franklin Roosevelt. In 1941, President Roosevelt came to this chamber to speak to the nation. He said, "I address you at a moment of unprecedented history in the Union. Hitler was on the march. War was raging in Europe." Now, I'm reading this how it is written and came up on his teleprompter. He talks about freedom and democracy under assault. And he said, "Tonight I come to the chamber, it's the same chamber, to address the nation. Now it was we who face an unprecedented moment in the history of our union. It's my purpose to wake up this Congress and alert the people that this is no ordinary moment either." Now, one of the things that we start off here is if you start off a speech invoking the speech that came from Franklin Delano Roosevelt talking about the war in Europe and Hitler being on the march, and then this dire picture of what the United States looks like right now, and if you hear a little bit more, what his dire picture was is he was afraid of Republicans, and he's the MAGA extremists, as he calls them, and Donald Trump on this big issue of, quote, democracy. Now, as we go through this speech, this is the way. So he started the tone off very dark, very ominous, that there's an impending doom and disaster. And the implication was, if you don't listen to me, you don't, as he said, don't wake up to what I'm trying to tell you, that the world is going to be in big trouble because I know what's right and I'm telling you what's right. And if you don't follow me, then the world is not going to be right. Now, what's interesting here is let me just go into this, is when here's the priorities. It's always said the State of the Union is a priority speech. It's a priority of the administration of what they're actually focused on. And so when they're actually focused on, these are the messages I want to get out. So you put them early in the message, you put them, prominently in the State of the Union so that people will get these. So here are the priorities that before Joe Biden gets to immigration, he gets to really even getting in depth, which he doesn't really talk about, inflation, doesn't talk about the economy all that much. These are the things that is missing. And what's interesting to me is typically a State of the Union would try to match what people are talking about in polls. And polling on both the Republican and Democratic side show that people are very, very concerned about immigration. They're concerned about jobs. They're concerned about inflation. They're concerned about energy prices. Well, you would expect those to have come up earlier in the speech. They did not. Here's what was the priorities. In fact, these were all priorities that were spoken of early on in the speech before getting to some of the real priorities that people see. Number one was Ukraine. Ukraine before America. This one is still stuck in the craw of a lot of people, that he goes to the Ukraine, talks about funding for Ukraine and wars of Ukraine before he even talks about the state of America, before he even gives anything about, hey, what are we doing? How are we doing? How is, the process of securing our borders, securing our economy, securing our freedoms. None of that's discussed first. The very first thing that he wants to go to is in the speech is that it is we've got to be a part of NATO. We've got to be a part of making sure that Europe is not at risk, and that the capital focus should be on supplying Ukraine with all of the information, all of the technology, all the money that they need. Again, well before he even mentions it, which is about 40, 50 minutes in the speech, when he gets to immigration, finally, he's already talked about, first thing, Ukraine. Second thing, January 6th and democracy. This will be a theme, folks. I'll tell you here from right up, for the rest of this election, they will try to tie Donald Trump to the people who went into the Capitol and did things at the Capitol. This is what they're going to do. The things that they did at the Capitol, if you break into a building, you shouldn't break in. You shouldn't break damaged property. You shouldn't. And those people are being held. Now, I will also say from a lawyer standpoint, it's amazed me at how long these cases are taking to come, and how that they're still arresting people and that they're still going at this. This has become a predominant theme that DOJ seems to want to continue to propagate here, is that this is an ongoing problem that has to be fixed. And the reality is not there. In fact, I've had cases and saw cases in my own circuits down here of murder that are brought and tried before some of these January 6th cases are. And this is, people are now starting to look at it as, look, if you're going to charge people, you're going to punish people, there needs to be a fairness and a quickness to this, going forward. And I think the active right of being at the Capitol is something of protest. And that is the theme that they're going to try and beat Republicans over the head with for this whole election cycle. So again, they go from Ukraine to this, quote, democracy argument, January 6th argument. He mentions it in the literally in the second page of his document. But it is interesting. Again, they try to claim this, just go straight to Donald Trump, that Donald Trump is an insurrectionist. Donald Trump is the one behind all this. And yet it is, their most partisan, rabid prosecutor, Jack Smith, will not even charge Donald Trump with insurrection. He just wouldn't do it. And yet you had states and basically very uneducated, very seemingly ignorant secretaries of states in Colorado and Maine who tried to take Donald Trump off the ballot for being an insurrectionist, although he had never been charged, never adjudicated, never been found guilty or anything in ranking of this idea of insurrection. So they just basically want to lock him up because they don't want him to run for president. And number two, I believe, because they think and know that he can beat Joe Biden. This is the problem they have. The next thing he went to is abortion. Okay, this is not a shocker. Abortion is going to be one of the big themes of the coming election. And if Republicans are not willing to put Democrats on the defensive about abortion, then we're going to have some trouble in some House seats, and it's going to be a raging discussion in the presidential campaign. Because, as I've said here on this show before, no matter what my personal or your personal beliefs about abortion, I don't think abortion should be a part of our lexicon at all. I just think it's wrong. But I will do anything, and I have shown this through my votes. I will vote to make sure that I can save as many unborn children as I can. And the interesting part is that is the view that 78 to 80% of all Americans take. They believe that there should be some form of restrictions on abortion, that it should not go to basically anytime you want it, for any reason you want it, and however you want it. It should not go to 40 weeks. But if Republicans are not willing to put Democrats on response to say that they're wanting to be able to take the life of unborn children in the womb up until 40 weeks of birth, then we're going to have to fight an issue that the Democrats are going to win, because they'll manipulate the language, manipulate the discussion into saying this is a personal choice between a woman and a doctor. But we've seen over time in polling through ultrasounds, and the more knowledge we have about unborn children and their viability and the fact of what abortion actually does, is that there's very few people in this country who truly, except Planned Parenthood and many of the National Organization for Women and all these and liberal Democrats, who will venture to say that I'm willing to say it's okay up until right before birth to take the life of a child. Think about this. These people are willing to kill an unborn child in the womb when literally a few minutes and the child would be born and it would be murder. This is, from a perspective of this child. So, I mean, again, this is what they're going to try and pan, but Democrats are going to get away with it until Republicans actually do a logical pushback and say, look, 80% of this country is actually believing that there should be some kind of restrictions on abortion. Why is it unreasonable to sit down and find a path forward on abortion? Now, you have absolutists on both ends, and I get that. But the vast majority of people find that if we can save children and make abortion, as once said by a Democrat president, make them rare, I think everybody will look at that. Then moves from there to abortion. After abortion goes into Bidenomics. The problem this is where I think the speech, frankly, in my opinion, really went off the rails. There's a way for him to say, look, we've done a lot of stuff. Some of it's working as fast as it should. Some of it's not working as fast as I want it to work. But we in the administration understand that times are hard. You feel that they're hard, and we're working to fix it. That would have been an easy line to put into the speech, but instead they just doubled down on the fact that the economy is better, the stock market's better, the unemployment rate's better. We brought in more jobs after the COVID, which was mainly people coming back to work than they said. But here's the problem that people heard, and I think why the polls didn't move and why the polls are not going to move, is that since Joe Biden took office, grocery prices are up 21%. Healthcare costs are higher than they were before Obamacare. Home affordability is at the lowest rate in 40 years. You have car payment defaults, 29-year high. Credit card debt is up 38.7%, and energy prices are up 40% in the Biden administration. Inflation from the time he took office is over 18%. It may be 3% or 4% now, but remember, that's over year that it's growing. It doesn't mean it's going backwards. In other words, the de-inflation, the big part of his Snickers speech that he wanted to talk about was, that you're getting less for more money. I don't think people care, Mr. President, about the Snickers as much as you think they do, as a cute little stunt for maybe your ice cream didn't work in that perspective. You're only getting one scoop instead of two scoops for the same price. Well, that is a part of the economy that people are feeling right now. They're feeling this issue of credit card debt. They're feeling this issue of loan defaults. They're feeling this issue that home and affordability is out of reach. That's why I believe that you're seeing more and more young people who who once favored Joe Biden or favoring Donald Trump, because they're not seeing the possibilities for a future that just a few years ago were possible. So as we look at this speech, and then he gets, after all of that, not really touching the kitchen table issues, so to speak, with the American people, he goes then into some just very one-off lines about national security, about immigration, basically trying to blame Republicans and into fixing it, and then going back and forth with members of the Republican Party when they said that you're not working on this and the bill in the Senate is not a good bill. And then the most poignant time in the night, and we may talk about this more at a later time, is the simple fact that when basically forced to say Laken Riley's name, he said Lincoln Riley. And he tried what was a try and overcome what the Republicans were saying about how bad immigration was, he ended up saying the most truthful thing that he said the entire night. And this is where we're going to end today with, because I want to focus on this issue because I think it's huge. It shows insight into Joe Biden. Even Joe Biden understands that this immigration crisis is wrong and it's killing his presidential reelection chances right now. Do they think they can overcome it? Sure, the Democrats think they can overcome it. But the issue is that Joe Biden said the silent part out loud. He said the truth. Joe Biden told the truth when he said that she was killed by an illegal immigrant in this country. Illegal alien. The left and the press went berserk. How could he say illegal? People are not illegal. They go that line all the time. People are not illegal. Yeah, they are. If they're in the country without authorization or permission, it's called being illegal. That they are in a state of illegality. They're not supposed to be here. And it's not just the ones who commit heinous acts like the one to Laken Riley, but Laken in her jog that morning was confronted with someone who had already committed crimes here in the U.S., and yet the sanctuary cities and sanctuary policies of New York and Athens contributed to her death that morning. And not only that, that contributed to the death of him even being here, coming through parole, through the Biden administration's open border concept is the reason this happened. But when he said illegal, they didn't hear anything else except you said illegal. The Progressive Caucus, the Hispanic Caucus just went bonkers. The next day, he basically said he tried to sort of walk it back and basically said he's not supposed to be here. He still couldn't get it right. And then he sat down with Jonathan Capehart and actually said, and this is the part that I think you're going to see on commercials all the way up to the November 5th election, was he was apologizing to an illegal alien in this country for saying the truth that he was illegal instead of saying undocumented. Now, how does that play to voters across the country when they see the president of the United States basically apologizing to a stone cold killer for using the wrong word to describe him? Doesn't it sound like the left and their obsession with pronouns and their obsessions with gender and relevance, and you have to believe what I believe or otherwise you're wrong? No, I don't. You can believe whatever you want to believe. I'm all in support of your belief if you want to believe whatever you think you are, but don't force others to go along with your story that you've concocted for the world to make yourself happy. I don't have to do that. And this is the problem I think Joe Biden is going to have on immigration going forward. Whatever good that he made, that he thought he made in this speech, especially to his Democrat base, was probably founded what he was tried to make to independents or others who might vote for him, who may are trying to find who they're going to vote for. That is something that's going to come back and bite him, especially going back and apologizing for using the wrong terminology. All in all, it was a speech in the Republican response. Katie Britt, senator from Alabama. The biggest issue is most people felt, especially Republicans, felt that the message was good. What was being said and brought out about the failures of the Biden administration were good. The big issue among Washington politicos and others who deal in politics and news media, and the Saturday Night Live skit, which was just, again, over the top. It's amazing they will not do anything close to that against Democrats. I mean, it's just become a campaign contribution in my mind from Saturday Night Live to the Democratic Party. Has been talked about being over dramatic and the parts and the seating in the kitchen and everything else. But I was talking with before we got on the podcast today that I've talked to many people since then who don't follow politics like you do and others who follow political podcasts like mine. They said that they appreciated it and that it presented real as compared to Joe Biden. And the issues that Senator Britt talked about were the issues that you would have expected Joe Biden to deal with, and Joe Biden didn't deal with. So that is just a take on the State of the Union. I think it's one that we'll be looking at. And the reason also that I think Democrats need to be concerned about this is that they hyped Joe Biden up for one speech. The very next day, he goes out and starts the flubs again. He starts the miscouts and the missteps again, saying that send me to Congress, basically, to Washington, D.C. while he was in Pennsylvania. These kind of mess ups just show that unless he is wired in directly to reading the prompter and doing the speech that he has been given, Joe Biden is going to have trouble on a campaign trail and probably would have a lot of trouble in a debate. So we'll talk more about this as it goes, but this is a good way to get your Monday started off. Go out and make it a good one. We'll see you next time on the Doug Collins Podcast.